Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a series which is Inner Harmony, where we continue the second session of the series, Self-Awareness and Self-Realization. This is a six-part series which is based on ancient wisdom and how to improve your life and have better mental well-being and conscious living. So speaker today is Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. We have 29 members on Zoom, and we do have Kaylee helping out in managing social media today. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome back to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Thank you so much, JM. It's always a pleasure to be back in this beautiful space with everybody. I'm really touched you're taking your valuable time to join. And looking forward to today's topic. Just the mention of conscious living was exhilarating to hear. You just mentioned it. And that means there's a way to go on living without really being very conscious. So this is a universal principle that we'll be talking about today. And if you're alive, and I think you probably are if you're on this show, unless you're a robot of some kind, then you'll get something from the experience today, because we'll be drawing from the ancient wisdom literatures. They give very clear, practical instructions about the ways to explore who we are, self-realization, and ways that we can take out some practices that help us to be more conscious in the way that we live. How's that sound, everybody? My teacher used to say, knowledge and practice. These are the two things that you need to move forward in any discipline. So hopefully we'll cover those today. Hey, thanks a lot, everybody, for all the thumbs up. Jam, do you have any other announcements before we move forward?
No, I was just going to say emojis are legal now. So yeah, we can use emojis and legal.
Yeah, there was a court case in Canada. They said you can use an emoji to actually give your legal assent to something. And if you gave a thumbs up somewhere, it's counted on a contract. That's pretty good. Well, let's look at the very first slide, because I want to mention the app, Success Sadhana app. And I've been using it myself. It's very simple, so simple. You won't have a learning curve on this one. It goes through 3 sections: body, mind, and spirit. You'll see it there on the right. Basically, what you're seeing there is a smartphone. But on the smartphone for the Success app, there's 3 sections: body, mind, and spirit. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions that we should live in balance. This is called yukta. We have body, we have mind, we have spirit. Spirit means the consciousness, us, the Atma who's animating the body. We're different from the body and mind, but we're living in cooperation with the body and mind, and it's an instrument that we need to interact with the world and also to learn the lessons in the classroom of this universe. So there are a few really simple steps, and I think simple is best, at least for me it is, because when I see simple steps, then I think, okay, it's possible I could do these. And once I get into those, I kind of get excited about it, because I think, well, there's a button to push that I've achieved them for the day, and that gets me on the right track, gets everything moving in the right direction for developing good habits. So I recommend the Success Sadhana app. It's the simplest app perhaps you'll see out of many, many. And it just recommends a few very, very simple steps to take each day. And you can click them off and feel satisfied at the end of the day. And you will make progress towards success. So today's talk is about self-awareness and self-realization. Self-realization may seem like a lofty term, so let's leave it way up there. But self-awareness, that's something that we could do at any time. And why don't we take a moment, as we do on most of the shows, we start off with a little bit of introspection. So what I'm going to do is put on some back into the room. So this self-awareness is recommended that we're an observer. That's an amazing power to have, power of observation. And the other power we just noticed is we can shift our attention where we wish. If you don't like what you're being subjected to, change the subject. That's our power as humans. That's our power as conscious beings. And that's the meaning of conscious living. Live with consciousness. So, JM, let's look at a few slides because there's a lot to talk about today in the matter of self-awareness, self-realization, Vedic knowledge practices that we can take up. So I'll go through a few at a time. Now, when I mentioned the Veda, last week we talked about the Vedic tree. Veda means knowledge. That's the direct translation. Knowledge of what? Well, there's knowledge of various aspects. The world, as we talked about last week, how to live in harmony with it. It comes with an instruction manual. And there's a point at which, even though we may be living in harmony with the laws of nature, we may feel, I'm different from nature itself, as we just observed. The body, the mind, they're going on as mechanical devices, practically. Although the mind's very subtle, still has its own algorithms. And consciousness cannot be defined by algorithms. We're beyond the predictability of the material elements. So, Oma Jnana Timirandasya, this is one of the opening phrases of the Vedas. And say, we're born into ignorance, Timirandasya. We have no light. That's why we require the help of our parents. We have to go to school for a long time and try to come up to some level of knowledge and understanding of the world. And realizing that this is our nature. When we come into the world, it's ours to discover and learn about and find out what's our place in it. And more importantly, as we'll see in the next slide, knowing ourselves. This is a human instinct. Going back hundreds and thousands of years, we find the inscription on the temple of Apollo, sometimes attributed to Socrates. He used to quote it, know thyself. Knowing oneself is the great frontier. Without knowing that, we may play so many roles in the world and be disappointed when we find out that those roles don't actually fit us. This morning, I was on an early morning walk and I saw a parent with his son going to school. I don't know what's going on today, but he had a costume on as Spider-Man. And he was animated. I could see how excited he was to be Spider-Man. I couldn't see his face. He had a mask on and a cape and all the leggings, everything, perfect costume. And he was running ahead of his father, opening his arms. And I could see that he felt some sense of superpowers of being Spider-Man. And I thought also of a friend of mine I went to high school with. He was a great hero in high school, at least football hero. And then later on, he joined the San Francisco Fire Department. And during the Loma Prieta earthquake, he became a hero there and he won an award. And later he wrote an article entitled Removing the Mask of the Hero. He wanted to step back from that moniker and see himself as a resident of the world in the same boat as everybody else. And in sociology, we learn about role playing. We learn roles. We assume roles. And the Vedas say, and so do the ancient philosophers from Greece and elsewhere in the world, wherever it may be, we must come to a place to dig a little deeper and know what's beyond the roles that we play, the masks that we wear. And it's a liberating experience. According to my friend, Jeff Walkup, he said when he resolved, I must take off the mask of the hero or the endeavor to maintain some status in the world and realize myself beyond that. He said it was a liberating experience. So this is a human urge to know thyself, and we should foster it according to the ancient philosophers and the Vedas. And let's go a little further, JM. Now, this one is attributed to Socrates directly. I bring him up because he had this specific awareness that he wasn't his physical body. And one of his proclamations, the unexamined life is not worth living. If you gain the whole world, you accumulate enough so that you're comfortable. Still, you came, then you left, and you didn't know yourself. What is the value of it all? So having a glimpse of ourself beyond the masks, and I'll describe in a minute of how even this physical body we're in now is a kind of mask that we're wearing. Examine, see who you are, and then life becomes so purposeful. Let's see the next one. So the Vedas also say, and I described, and again, I'm repeating, last week I talked about a system of knowledge, sometimes called the Vedas. It's a very generic term, just means knowledge. Knowledge of many different departments of human activity, how to organize one's life, how to organize society. There's martial arts, and there's living in harmony with the world. And then there's a point at the Upanishads that we come to ask bigger questions. Who am I besides just this role I play in the present body I'm in? And they really encourage us. They come out with this statement in a book called the Vedanta Sutra that starts with this really loud proclamation. Atato Brahma Jignasa, that's Sanskrit, which means Atato, therefore, Atato Brahma Jignasa, now that you've attained the human life, ask really big questions. Try to find out the biggest question first. Who am I? Let's see the next slide. So they give us this permission. It's like really inquire. So explore. And one of the ways to explore is to ask. I just finished a book, and it's all about asking questions. And I was so delighted to find that the word question comes from the word quest. When you ask a question, especially a big one, if you want to go on a real journey, it's a quest. It's a place you go when you ask the question to find out something valuable. So ask and you'll find out what you're looking for. So explore means to search out, from ex out, and plorare, which means to utter a cry. I also found that significant. When we're exploring something, we may be helpless, as I started with the first slide, that we're born into ignorance. So we're dependent. So what do we do to explore? Explorare. We utter a cry. Who am I? That's a good utterance, a good question to put out there to the world. And anything we want to know, we should cry for it. Utter a cry. I like that. Onward. So look at that little word cloud there. Every one of those is an ology. Do you have any idea there are so many ologies? And that's not all of them. That's just a few that we put together. And I put on the side psychology, sociology, archaeology, biology, technology. All these ologies reflect the human spirit of trying to find out how this whole thing works. This whole thing means the world and my place in it. This is the path of self-discovery. And there's a sense that there's something to figure out. It's not random, although there are some philosophers who come to the point of desperation and they opine that there is nothing to discover. We are nothing. We enter into nothing and nothing means anything. But when you're mourning the loss of a loved one, we don't think like that. We know they were there. We know we had a relationship. The idea that they disappeared into a void and they never existed in the first place doesn't resonate with the human spirit, at least according to the Vedic philosophers. They say we do exist and we do have an identity. It's just covered now by different kinds of masks and so forth. And to the point of this slide, the human search for meaning through ologies. Ology has this sense that there is some system in the universe that's there to figure out. After psychology, for instance, what are we trying to figure out? There are noticeable ways in which a human being has thought patterns. I was just talking to a friend of mine who's a psychologist when we were down in Texas, and he was telling me about the different kinds of the categories of ways in which we get stuck psychologically, at least according to modern psychology, and the ways that he and other psychologists might deal with them. So there's a pattern to study. That means there's an ology there to look at. So that's quite an impressive cloud, don't you think? And many of them are very specific to parts of nature, looking at bugs, entomology, for instance. You can catalog bugs forever, and you can learn how to draw them and figure out how they survive. For instance, in the Sahara Desert, there's a beetle that lives in the hottest place on Earth. Of course, that might be Phoenix now, I don't know. But Sahara Desert, and how does that beetle survive with no water? It stands in the evening on the top of a sand dune and doesn't move. Thousands of them stand there. And when there's a slight change in temperature in the evening, any moisture that's in the air, it develops on their hind legs, a little drop of dew, and that's what they survive on. That's an interesting fact. That's what you find out as an entomologist. You can go deep into the subject of the beetle in the Sahara Desert. So the human mind is capable of going into many, many ologies. But what is the ultimate ology? The ology of self-discovery. Find out who you are first. Ask that question. Maybe ask another scarier one. Why do I have to die? If I come in this world, is there a purpose for me here between when I come out into the world and when I'm leaving? Is there an ideal way to do it? And there's an ology for that. There is a science behind it called the science of self-realization. Okay, JM, should we take impressions so far, or should I keep going a little further?
No, it's a nice time to take an impression.
All right, let's do that. Now, just remember, we got the chat box there. This is a free room. Feel free to chat in the chat box or to speak up. All you have to do is unmute. If you'd like to say something, a good place to start is if you have a reflection. Anything you heard so far that resonated with you, then please just unmute and say it. And if you have a question, you want me to go into something more in detail, I'll do that.
Yes, please unmute and share reflections, questions, or type it in the chat box. Phone lines are waiting.
Hi, this is Yan Yan. I'd like to share something. Can you hear me okay?
Hey, good to hear you again after so long. Thanks for joining. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So you were talking about roles that we're born into. I have an interesting story to share. Is again about my dog. So this time I got a new dog. He was a puppy when I got him. He's 9 months old. He's a Great Pyrenees. So this breed is a flock guardian dog. So they guard the sheep, geese, whatever have you. And I'm 9 months old. And one day we went to the playground, and my boyfriend thought just to test it out and see what his instinct reaction is, because this is like only maybe 3 days after we got him. So still fresh, right? And so he just all of a sudden grabbed my collar, start shaking me. And then my dog just immediately pounced on him, didn't hurt him, but kind of like, hey, what are you doing? Get away from her. And started circling around me. So he's like, I am the guardian. I'm protecting you. So even though he's in the household, but he's doing something to harm you. So he's like just circling him, like, don't get near him, near her. And watching his hand movement and everything. I thought that was funny. That was like an inborn role.
Yes. And if you get a beaver as a pet and bring it home, it'll start building dams inside your house. I actually saw a video of it once. This is the conscious impetus of the living being. And according to the Vedas, the different kinds of vehicles that we get in, like the human body, as I mentioned, is a special vehicle for inquiry. We all have an appreciating capacity according to the body that we have. And then we can see the emotions come through in certain animals. In all the animals that we know, we will notice that they have the desire to survive. If you encounter a little spider and say, hi, how are you doing? Is like, I'm fine, but are we good here? Are you going to hurt me, or are you going to let me go? There's a definite awareness of wanting to continue and not be extinguished somehow or other. We're all hanging on to that sense of our own existence. Thank you so much, Yan, for sharing again. And let's see what else we have there, JM.
We have a few things rolling on the chat box. Victor says ology comes from Greek. I think there's some Greek word which says which means, I think, logos, speech, account, story.
Yes, the logos. That means there's some way that it's ordered, like speech has syntax. Otherwise, and it also has, well, syntax means there's some orderliness to it. There's spaces in between one word and another and so forth. And we can become linguists. We can figure out different languages because it has some order to it. Yes. And meanwhile, that concept goes out to the whole world. Go ahead, JM.
Wolf also built on top. He said, all the ologies reaffirmed my understanding that science is the reverse engineering of God's creation.
Hey, Wolf's here. Thanks for joining, Wolf. Good to hear that you're here again. And I like the reverse engineering, the idea of discovering the universe and looking into the soul of the universe and not divorcing the idea of consciousness and science and so forth is a ancient process, actually. The divorce between science and philosophy or even spirituality has only been recent, and it's not a very good separation. It's not going well. So I like your idea of putting the two back together again. What else, JM?
Laksh asks a question. Isn't knowledge a static entity? How does knowing oneself work since we are constantly changing?
Well, I'll go into that in the next couple of slides, and I'll keep your question as a context for what I'm about to explain, even in the next slide.
Next, Kennedy shares. Kennedy, you want to maybe share, or should I just read out?
She wants you to read it.
Okay. So Kennedy says, thank you for such an important topic. I am very struck by the example of the beetle, how sometimes our well-being is a test of endurance, and yet we will still be provided for in our stringent endeavors. So we should always keep going.
The example of the beetle. Yeah. Yeah, and I like how you frame that. That is actually a thing. That is being aware that we're already being provided for. Of course, there are artificial standards of living that sometimes leave people out, but in the natural course of things, this is a statement made by one of the great teachers of antiquity who said, just notice that even though we don't want bad things to come into our life, they do automatically. And similarly, good things come also. And there's a way that we can notice that all living beings have their quota being offered to them. That is, all the ants in the world are getting fed quite nicely. All the elephants, not that there's that many left, but when there were elephants, they're all being fed also. So yeah, we can attend to self-realization without overdoing it on the comfort side and trying to be cozy here in this world. Go ahead, JM.
SG asks a question. What you said resonated well, but why are we still stuck and still running after day-to-day things, worrying about kids and their future or struggles to get a promotion, etc.? Introspection says that they should matter, but they still seem to bother. I think introspection says they should not matter, I guess, but they still seem to bother us. Is there a way to go? And he followed up saying, yeah, I think he says it does not matter. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, everything matters according to the Bhagavad Gita. And kids are always going to give you some anxiety. You can count on that. So the point is balance. We should know that we have two duties in life. One is for our highest purpose and destination. And the other one means that we should dutifully maintain everything that we've been given, including our families and whatever wealth we have, whatever dwelling we have. These are not ruled out in the Vedas. The Vedas are very practical. They know that we have to live. We have needs that we have to fulfill. So the Vedas say, don't take more than your quota. So you can't enjoy it anyway. Let's just say you try to get, if you have $1 billion and let's say you eat toast every day. Maybe toast isn't so as popular as it used to be. But anyway, let's say you can eat 2 pieces of toast and you live by modest means. And then let's just say somebody gives you $1 billion. Can you eat more than 2 pieces of toast because you have $1 billion? Maybe you get a better quality of toast, but it's still only 2 pieces of toast. So there's a way that on the material side, we have a certain capacity, and we have to maintain that. We can't neglect it also, because if we do, then we'll be out of balance, and it makes it very difficult to actually take time to inquire and introspect. So we have to attend to the needs dutifully that we have because of our body and mind. And at the same time, simultaneously, we have to go on cultivating this self-realization. And in fact, the other day, someone was telling me, an artist, said, if you do a completely stark white background, it doesn't look as white as when you put a little bit of blue in it. And somehow it brings out the whiteness. So in a similar way, in one of the ancient teachings called the Upanishads, it is said, Vidyam cha yas tad vedo bayam saha avidyayam ritum tirtva vidyayam ritum ashnute. Then when you learn nescience or ignorance and knowledge side by side, you get the benefit of the contrast and you learn more. So it's not a non-starter that we have a material, so-called material life. And also the Vedas say when you use everything that you have that's so-called material, it transforms into something, a higher kind of energy. And I'll give an example that my teacher used to give. If you take an iron rod and you put it in fire and you leave it long enough, then the iron rod transforms from iron to fire. So whatever we have, whatever we're using now, if we orient it towards the highest goal of life and we use things purposefully, then those things that seem to be material actually become spiritualized. It's one of the great secrets of the Vedas, how to make one's whole life spiritual. Anything else, JM?
Yes, there's one more question.
Okay.
Or thought. Teresa says, it's interesting to me that as an infant, a major accomplishment is learning about object permanence. As an adult, we struggle to let this go and learn object impermanence, which seems to be vital to our journey.
Well, yes, I don't know the exact terminology there, but there is a way when we come into the world that we struggle to find ourselves, even socially and in the family and so forth. And I mentioned that earlier as in sociology, and also to have a sense. I remember when I was young, even in kindergarten, I remember being a little uneasy about the world. President Kennedy was killed and shot, and I think I was either in kindergarten or first grade, and I was sent home, and I didn't like it at all. I didn't mind being sent home, don't get me wrong, but I didn't like that all of a sudden everyone was happy there was a president, and then all of a sudden the president was gone. And I thought, this sense of impermanence really disturbed me all the way through till I got to high school. That's why I decided to look into the matter more deeply, and I became a monk to study it and study myself more carefully. So yeah, I mean, on one side, we do have to have a sense that we have a base, and we have to have, as according to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we have to have a sense that we have some protection, we have social connections, we have people who love us. And then we also have to reach up higher and understand that, okay, these support systems are coming from somewhere else also, and I'm supported on a much higher level at the same time. Well, you have Tim and Vicky up there in the left-hand corner. That's the hot corner up there where we know you're going to ask a question or give a comment. Please go ahead.
Thank you. A wonderful lecture. Yeah, as far as self-awareness and all the ologies, I remember learning about in sociology or psychology, the Stanford Prison Experiment, where you have like these group of students, all very bright, all Stanford students, and they built like a shoddy prison, and some of them were designated to be guards, some of them were designated to be prisoners, and they played these roles. And by the end of 2 weeks, they had to stop the whole experiment because the guards had become abusive, and they got totally lost in the experiment. They forgot they were students, and it was at the misfortune of the prisoners and everything else. But so easily we could be distracted, even in a shoddy experiment. You know, what to speak of these bodies and our other day-to-day dealings. Anyways, thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. That was so spot on. It's just indicative of the ways that we can immediately identify with another role and then get so caught up in it, even though it's an experiment. What to speak of, as you said, our so-called, real or permanent identity that we have in this life, which also changes all the time. Wow. Thanks a lot. Such good feedback and questions. Amazing. Well, JM, let's do a few more slides because I promised some practical points here, and I'm burning up the clock fast here.
Before that, just a quick announcement we do have the next stop, the Mantra Zone session today, where we will meet together in person in Palo Alto for some mantra music, meditation, wisdom, and vegetarian dinner. We'll start at 6:30. We'll have half an hour dinner followed by mantra music, meditation, some light talk, and again meditation music. So if you are able to in and around, please do come by, because today we have a special guest. We have Vaish coming down to the Mantra Zone. So it will be a very exciting evening. So those who are able to, please do come. And I do have the meetup link, bhakticommunity.com/meetup-palo-alto. Or you can scan this barcode here. And looking forward to who all can come. So any other thing you want to add to this, Avaish?
Yeah, you should. It says next stop the Mantra Zone. You should try to say it like Rod Serling.
Okay, I'll practice that. I'm sure.
Oh, let me give you, it goes, next stop, the Mantra Zone. Could you try that?
Next stop, the Mantra Zone.
Okay. Great. All right. So let's look at a few more slides. We've talked about the ologies and the great need to inquire. And then the Vedas giving us this full permission. Don't feel silly about asking a simple question. In fact, there's a story I just wrote about in my new book of these very accomplished, one was a prime minister and the other one was a chief of finance in Bengal 500 years ago. And they had become weary of their lives, even though they were extremely wealthy and powerful. And they met this teacher named Chaitanya. And after meeting the teacher just briefly, they decided in their hearts that they wanted to dedicate their lives to self-realization. So when they finally got to meet Chaitanya face to face, one of the first questions they asked, who am I and why am I suffering? One of them said, I'm so foolish that I accept myself as the way people judge me, which is that I'm very learned, I'm very wealthy, and I'm so foolish I accept that. So, but frankly, I don't know who I am. And if you think about the fact that we really don't know where we came from, right? I mean, who can say, where did you actually come from? My mother's womb. Yeah, but what about before that? Where were you? And how did you end up coming out in a certain place? And another question, equally as vexing, where are we going? Nobody really knows, right? We have no idea. Even if you have some sense, well, I'm going to be emancipated and I'm going to go to heaven or whatever it might be. It's like, you really don't know that much about it, except what you may have heard a little bit. So we're kind of in a state of wonderment about who we are and so forth. So the Veda says, start by knowing who you are. And they give this helpful information about categories of energy. So first of all, the body, you can observe for yourself that the body is temporary. How can you do that? Well, if you've ever seen a dust bunny, who here knows what a dust bunny is? Anybody? Who can say what it is? What's a dust bunny made out of? It's made out of dust. That's good. Thank you. So a dust bunny is made out of dust. And where does that dust come from? It comes from our skin. We exfoliate skin all the time, constantly. We don't see it necessarily, but it comes off. And you'll notice that if you're not home for a while and you come back, there's no dust bunnies, because dust doesn't just grow by itself. It comes off of our bodies. And if more people stay in your house, you'll notice there's more dust bunnies, because it's skin that's sloughed off of your body. Why does that make a difference? Vaisheshika, tell us. The reason is because our bodies are always sloughing off. They're becoming something else. They're becoming dust bunnies. And every organ in the body is always recycling. We're never the same. So the Vedas say, be observant of the categories of energy. First of all, I may claim I'm my body, but that's a really tenuous claim, because the body's always changing. And it's not one thing. It's a bunch of organs stuck together. And if you think of yourself compartmentalized rather than as one entity, and think, oh, the body's a bunch of different organs that are working in harmony with one another. Which one am I? Am I my hair, or am I my fingernails? What about my heart? Those things can be replaced, actually. So next is the mind. And the Vedas give us this valuable information that is that we're not our minds either. The mind is also part of the material world, part of the material energy. It's subtle, just like software perhaps is subtle. The mind is a subtle material element, but beyond both the gross material elements of this body, which we can identify easily by just cataloging them, looking at our own bodies, and the mind, which is subtle material elements, there's a different category of energy, which is the conscious self, which has been called in one of the ancient writings antimatter, to express how different it is from the other energy called matter. It's antimatter. It's opposite properties. Whereas matter is always degrading and changing, or growing and changing, the conscious self, who we are, doesn't degrade. In fact, you can't kill it. So that's interesting news. The Vedas come out right out and say it, you never die. That's a big question. People ask, do we die or not die? No, you don't die. Only your body changes. And in fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that we should notice that just as we're changing from youth to adolescence and then to middle age and then old age, so similarly, we get another body when we leave this body. For one reason or another, we leave the body. So we get another one, just as we get other bodies while we're in this lifetime. And although they resemble the original body, they're categorically different. So that's a distinction that's very important. And that is, we're not the gross and subtle material bodies, but we're actually the conscious self within the body that animates the body. Next. So you are a being. And I looked up the word be. It means, it comes from the Indo-European root remain. And remain means to continue to exist, especially after other similar or related people or things have ceased to exist. Thank you, dictionary, for giving me a strike right down the middle, because being means that which remains. That fits very well within the Vedic concept. And everything else will move past us, as in a movie or as in a changing river. It's always changing, but our being, that's what remains. And if we consider that we remain, our spiritual essence, we, the conscious being, remain, even when the body changes, even when we're asleep, we're still there, even though we're in a dream world. And even when we give up this present body, there's a lot of implications to that in the way we organize ourselves. If we're on a continuum and we know that this life is not the only life, it makes a huge, huge difference. It's different from doing, isn't it? I like the way you put those slides up there, Jan, because we're not human doings. A friend of mine used to say that. You're not a human doing, just be a human being. Okay, let's see the next slide. So one of the tenets of self-realization is you know what remains. And there's a little hint given here. The body does not remain. So what is it that remains? If the body doesn't remain, what remains? If you do it by process of elimination, you'll come to yourself, because yourself is the part that remains, not the body. So here's some thoughts. I call them mantras, because a mantra is something you may repeat frequently in order to transform yourself. And these are mantras, obviously in English, and they lead to inner harmony, one of the main topics of this series. And here's the first one. What you are is more important than what you have. Everyone, please say that. What you are, or what I am, is more important than what you have. And the word be and are and is, they're all the same verb that describe the part that remains. So we may have so many things, and you may have them and not have them. Has anybody had something that they valued a lot and then you lost it somehow? Everyone raised their hand. Okay. What'd you have, Kennedy, and then you lost it?
Many, many phones.
Many, many phones. Okay. Anybody else have a sad story of something they had and lost? I've got one. I had a wedding ring, wedding band. I wore it to Tokyo. And after the flight and everything, my finger was so enlarged from the flight that I moved my wedding band to another finger. And when I was walking through the streets of Tokyo, it slid off my hand. So when you're walking in Tokyo and you lose your wedding band and you're not sure where you walked, it's gone. And that happened. I think I could make a long list. Every one of us could. Did anybody put anything up?
Several.
We need a little commiseration here. Come on, give us a little love now.
Jason says my sanity.
Your sanity, Jason. Okay, that can happen.
Rajesh says youth. Prem says time. And then Kennedy again, family members and friends.
Yeah.
Jason says marriage, lol.
Yeah.
And
this is philosophy. And if you go back to like our Ozymandias poem, the philosophers are going like, what remains? He's saying, oh yeah, the big regime of Ozymandias. He's the big king. He looks down on everyone. Now he's gone. So the next one is, this too shall pass. This was one of the most popular sayings on this show during the beginning of the pandemic. Everyone said, like, what is going to happen? What is going on? Just say this to yourself, this too shall pass. And that is a calming mantra to remember that we're permanent. Whatever's around us is passing through. And the third one is that happiness comes from within. This is reassuring because we don't have to become something in order to enjoy or to be happy. We don't have to acquire something more or change our environment, because what we are is so amazing that when we become aware of it, we feel naturally satisfied. Okay, I'm going a little faster because I realize what time it is. So here are some secrets of self-realization from the Vedas. Everyone ready? Everyone likes secrets? Don't tell anybody. Okay, the first one is do selfless service. Do selfless service. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? What did you do this weekend? I did selfless service. And people, oh, tell me more. I want to know. Okay, we feel naturally happy when we're in service to a higher cause. According to the Veda, that's because we're part of the whole. And when the part serves the whole, just like when my hand serves my mouth and stomach by feeding it, it naturally enjoys. And it's better to give than receive. It's better to do selfless service than to demand service from others. We feel more satisfied because it's our dharma, our natural position. The second secret of self-realization from the Vedas. First one is practical, right? Yeah. In fact, you'll notice on our app, Success Sadhana, it's one of the points is do some selfless service today. Try it, see how you feel. If you don't feel better when you do selfless service, we'll give your money back for the app. And by the way, it doesn't cost anything. Okay, next one, introspect. Notice how you exist separate from your body and mind. Notice it. We tried it a little bit this morning, but take a little time to notice if you can get a gap between what's going on in your body and in your life situation, and yourself as the observer. You'll be able to deal with the world in a more enlightened way because you'll see it for what it is. It's an instrument for service. That is our bodies. And the world's a place where we learn. Third is connect with super consciousness or super spirit. This is the great secret of yoga. In fact, in the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali, he says, connect with super consciousness. We're individualized consciousness, but we can connect with the super consciousness or the super spirit. And that's the topic of yoga. And when we do that, then we're able to feel connection to our higher self, and we're able to connect to a reservoir of what's called happiness. And the third, that means, I should say, a reservoir of ananda, which is called happiness, or which means happiness. And the third is feed your intellect with wisdom. The intellect of the human is so important. And if we feed it with random videos on TikTok, there's a difference between that and deliberately taking in systematic wisdom that comes from the ancient Vedas or any wisdom tradition that's really trying to help us understand that we're not just part of this world. And it's amazing if you have a regular diet of this every day, diet, I say, in the way of feeding your intellect, you'll notice that you're more self-observant throughout the day. And it leads to this urge for self-realization and an awareness that we're something more than just this physical body and mind. JM, let's see the last slide, which is, drum roll, please. Reflections. Name one thing, we only have time for a few. Name one thing that you heard, and you can only use one sentence, maybe with a semicolon, that you heard that you're taking away from today's presentation. Make my day.
Yeah, you can unmute and share. Meanwhile, just keep reading. And Anna said, I need to drop, so glad to be back. And Mayank said, yeah, Mayank said, just deleted TikTok app from my phone and installed the Success Sadhana app. And then Teresa says, garbage in and garbage out. Sorry, the comments are pouring in. Words told to me as a child, and I now say to my kids. What you are is more important than what you have, is what Manish says. Aditi, this shall pass. Dennis, yourself is the part that remains, not the body. And
thanks, everybody.
Alifia says, know thyself.
Know thyself. Maintaining a regular diet of wisdom will strengthen the urge for self-realization. We are what does that say?
We are what remains.
We are what remains. Yeah. That was my revelation for the day, looking up that word. Well, thanks, everybody, for taking your time to go on this journey. I hope there's some structure there, some ology that you take with you, that you transfer. I recommend going to the app because it does give some parameters. And I also recommend next stop, the Mantra Zone. Stop on by. JM has invited the whole world to stop by his house. So let's do it. I'm going. And we can have some fun over there. We'll do a little mantra meditation. And I don't know, the cooks over there are from some other world. It's fantastic. The food there is the best I've ever had. It's a warm environment. Hope to see some of you there, or all of you, actually. And, that reminds me, the yogis high in the Himalayas, I don't think they're going to make it down to your house, but they do at intervals find things for their diet out in nature. Sometimes they find tubers. I've seen them. They're gigantic, these tubers, and they can cut them up. Very natural kind of diet they have, just living on sunlight, air, and a few roots and fruits. But when they do go out into the bright sunshine of the Himalayas, once in a while, much to their joy, they see one of their colleagues who's come out also at the same time for foraging, and they get really excited because they know they're on the path together. So they have this ritual. They raise their hands high in the air and they call out, even if it's a long ways away, this phrase, Hari Bol, which means keep the transcendental vibration going. It's meant to encourage the others to practice their sadhana. And I was just thinking maybe we should try it because we're in a little cave-like rooms. What do you think?
Haribol.
1, 2, 3.
Haribol.
Next stop, the Mantra Zone.
Haribol.